Thank you for joining us for this session of Chapter Chats. We're going to be talking about Chapter 7, Development, in Dr. Chuck Hodell's new book, Introduction to Instructional Design, Theory and Practice. Chuck, here we are talking about development. Can you talk about what the main operational elements of the development function in ISD are?
Well, most of the time in development in ISD, these are the tangibles. These are the things that learners touch, they see, they use, and this is by any sense of the imagination, the phase in which you take all of this great planning and turn it into tangible things that you can look at and hold and print and put online and do all these things. So this is where it really comes to life. And as a designer, I always love this phase because this is where things really started to look good and you were ready to go out there and start to implement. And the other thing that you'll find you want to do in development is do pilot testing too. You don't want to wait till implementation to do pilot testing. So it's materials and then give it a last test run on your product and make sure it's going to work.
What are the 5 types of subject matter experts when you're dealing with the development phase? They are very crucial.
So the subject matter expert says this is a whole this is a whole nother book. And when we think about subject matter experts, what I want designers to think about is the fact that they aren't just the technical experts. So it's not just a technical SME, which is this is the person that comes in as a PhD in a field and is going to tell you all about this stuff. Or this is not the person that's worked in this job for 15 or 20 years. You can tell you in their sleep how the process goes, and you can do a step-by-step analysis and then turn it into a course. There's other people in here too. And the ones that I think are most important for development are the technical folks because you needed to get them into this before you got to here. But then you've got this whole group of people that do the professional side of materials development. So you have photographers, you've got people that do PowerPoints, you've got people that are going to take your LMS, your learning management system, and code that up so that it works, put together shells and frameworks and do different things. And I think in terms of development, there's also Sentinel SMEs and others that play roles within ISD. But I think in a development phase, the ones you really want to think about are those technical folks that take your product and turn it into something really special.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned photographers, maybe graphic designers, the people behind the scenes coding for the LMS. Those are things that maybe people don't even consider subject matter experts. And
Exactly.
yeah, so it's really important that we do consider that they are those subject matter experts. Now, speaking of subject matter experts, is there a method or tips that you can give to the listeners of this? Best practices to be able to work productively with subject matter experts.
Yeah, I think the first thing is that as instructional designers, we need to admit that we are subject matter experts. And I think there's this wall that people like to create between instructional designers and subject matter experts. This notion that somehow we're different. Well, we're not. We're subject matter experts in ISD. And I think as soon as you start to let that sink in a little bit, you start to realize, yeah, this is one big family here. We can pout and, and do everything we want to, but in the end, we're all here for the same reason to put together an incredible product that people can learn from. So the biggest thing I would tell anybody is make subject matter experts part of your design family. Bring them in, put them at the table, buy them lunch, do whatever you need to do, but make sure that they understand that this really doesn't work without them. And you want them to be there. You appreciate what they're going to do. And, just be part of this. And one thing that I heard 2 weeks ago when I worked with a group of folks, of subject matter experts and instructional designers, was that the subject matter experts said they didn't understand instructional design. They didn't understand what instructional designers did. And some of them had the idea that mostly what instructional designers do is just put together PowerPoints and it ends up in the course. And you can imagine the instructional designers found that a tad interesting. But it brought to light the fact that, the second thing we need to do is teach them what we do as instructional designers. Teach them about ISD, teach them about objectives, teach them about performance agreement, and all the other things that we do so that they can understand and appreciate how important they are and where they fit into this whole thing that we do. And if you make them part of the family, explain to them what this whole thing is that we do behind the mirror, and off you go. And the other things you want to do is sometimes you need to be their advocate with supervisors and others, because many times subject matter experts are just dropped in. They're not given extra time to work on a project. They're not really scheduled into it. They're just say, oh, by the way, spend 40 hours a week helping these folks out. So they're still expected to do their other job. They're still expected to do this and that on occasion. So what I found is I always became the main advocate for my subject matter experts where I needed to within the system, to make sure that they got what they needed, that they felt like they were functioning parts in this and not just adjuncts that really were just kind of added on at the last moment. So make them part of the family, tell them what you do, and go out and advocate for them and be their star in this whole thing.
Yeah, that's wise advice. It's really, any team that works well together knows their value as a team and knows the value of the individual components that each person brings in. And by by leading by that with that example, by taking the subject matter expert under your wing or being their advocate, understanding their value and knowing and letting them know that you understand their value, I think is the key.
Well, I think you have to do that. And just think about it from the perspective of being a subject matter expert. It's not easy on them. I mean, what if I was dropped onto a very complicated work process with no background and no training and said, well, just go do your part? I'm going to be completely lost. And somebody who knows what they're doing is going to have to help me get integrated into that. So, why do we at any level think, as instructional designers, that subject matter experts can just drop into our very complicated system and know exactly what their role is, what they're supposed to do? It's just nonsense. So, I think if we recognize, like I said, that we are subject matter experts too, then we start to get a feel for what this is all about. And there is no difference. It's just a matter of what we're subject matter experts in, not that we are or aren't.
Now, you had mentioned pilot testing earlier. Can you talk about why should we bother doing pilot testing? What is the critical importance of it?
Well, pilot testing and development, if you're doing a large scale project, let's say you're going to be putting this out to 1,000 people or 5,000 people or 100,000 people, and there are printed materials or there are other things that need to be produced, and you haven't proven yet whether what you have designed actually works. Um, I can't tell you how many times I've seen very large printing bills and very large other bills that came in that immediately had to be reprinted. So we have an all new pile of bills
Been
because
there, done
they're
that in marketing, but still.
okay. So it's the same thing. It's not just instructional design, but the whole notion is put it out there, test it, tear it up, jump on it, throw it around, bat it, run over it with your car, and find out if everything is what it's supposed to be. So I can guarantee you that one run through of a course, each course in a program, however many you got, do the math. Even if it's just your design team and your subject matter experts sitting around a desk or on Zoom, go through the course like you're going to implement it. Pull in the materials when you say they're going to be pulled in. If you're doing slides, look at the decks, make sure that they're right. And before you go into production, before you put it out there for final implementation, make sure everything is what you think it is. And I've seen little things like, gosh, there are large organizations that have style sheets, and if you don't have the exact right color on materials, they will not accept it. And I can tell you, as a design organization, if you've taken responsibility for a style sheet and you miss that, you are talking about more money than you even want to think about. And besides the money factor is the embarrassment factor that you didn't do your job the way you wanted to do it. So those are the kind of things you're going to catch in pilot. The other thing you're going to catch in pilot is how long your course actually takes to implement. Everybody thinks that their 60-minute course takes 60 minutes, and it doesn't. Your 60-minute course will take 90 minutes because people show up late. This happens and that happens. And the only way you're going to find that out is to put it in pilot. Get in there and let's see how long this 60-minute course actually runs. And you think that's silly, but I can guarantee you that every novice designer that designs a 60-minute course, it never ran in 60 minutes. ever.
I am sure.
So
Absolutely.
Pilot will get you to all this stuff. Make your I mean, it's just like you're telling learners when you go through the 9 events. Okay, let's practice in a safe environment. Let's make sure that you have chances to exercise this before we put it out. Same thing in design. This is our iteration and feedback phase. Let's
Yep.
make sure we got this right.
Practice ground. It's the perfect safe environment to be able to do that before things really are crucial and matter and cost money. One last question. Why should we conduct train the trainer sessions for new courses?
Well, I think train the trainers, if you have the budget for it, and a couple of other things you need to think about. Trainers are required if you have a new facilitation group, if you have new instructors, if you have new content for these instructors. Um, I just think it's incredibly important, especially if there's a level of nervousness about the content or delivery, that you get that out. It's just like if you're an actor, how many times do you have sessions where you go through each act or each scene in a movie? You take the time, you do the desk read, and then you go out and you actually walk through it, and then you do costume. And okay, it's no different here. This is the kind of stuff that you really need to think about. And the way you get the nerves out of instructors and the way that you make sure that they understand what they're supposed to do. And that's the other side of it. As someone who's sponsoring this or someone who's designing it, I want to make sure that they can implement this the way I designed it. And you'll find out really quickly if instructors are going to go start freelance on the way things are supposed to be done. And the other things that'll happen, and once again, you get into the timing issue. If you've now decided that your 60 minutes is 90 minutes, make sure they can do it in 90 minutes. And make sure that they do the evaluations where they're supposed to, and make sure that all these things take place. And the other way to do this is what we call see one, do one. So actually, the design team will implement the first iteration of this with the facilitators watching, and then you pop the facilitators in to do the second running of it. So that they get to see what your plan is. And it's like a walkthrough if you're in a play or a movie. It's not, it's just move up from the desk read to let's walk through it. And I think it's so important because they can kind of sit there and say, wow, I would do that a little differently, or why are they doing it that way, or that took too long, or and then you can have those discussions if you need to, but then they see the way that the design is supposed to be worked. And okay, and then they get up and do it, and you fine tune it then. And by the time you get into implementation, you've got a pretty sound facilitation crew that you can count on. And I've done this with groups, 300-400 facilitators, actually more than that, a couple of things that we did. So in large scale implementation, this is the kind of stuff you want to invest in. You want to make sure this product is sound when you send it out.
And I'm pretty sure that the facilitators are grateful for that kind of dress rehearsal as well, to be able to make sure that they get to work the kinks out before they
Well,
actually go live with it
there's
too.
nothing scarier than to stand up in front of a group of people for the first time teaching you something you've never taught.
Right.
I mean, nobody wants to do that.
No.
And if it's possible, if there's a way you can budget it, or if you have an in-house group where you have more control over it, I mean, if you're doing it in Zoom or remote with groups or something, there are ways to do this. But anytime you have someone just stand up and do it cold, it's not going to be the best product, no matter how good they are, no matter how good the course is.
Absolutely. Well, this has been very insightful. Thank you so much for sharing your insights on this, as always. Thank you for everyone tuning in to Chapter Chats. We hope that you enjoyed this session and learned a lot from it. If you have questions or comments, feel free to put them in the comments and we'll get back to you. Thanks again.